check out our sponsor, ProPureUSA.com. That's ProPureUSA.com, the leading innovator in water filtration systems. Get all of your water filters at ProPureUSA.com. Click the link below right now. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. Today's video, I'm going to discuss the global economic outlook for 2015 and what's on the top of my mind and what is top of mind at this given point in history. You know, I think the most interesting thing right now is collapsing oil prices. It really is a leading indicator, and it is a massive macroeconomic shift in how the world does business, how it affects consumers, and what's happening geopolitically. And we've discussed this in length. We've talked about how it's just a mere convenient coincidence that it targets specifically the enemies of the West. It targets Vladimir Putin's government. It targets Russia. It targets all of their exports, 30% to Europe, of which the European Union depends on, etc. We've had a number of characters come out in recent days, principally one of the Saudi elite, Prince Alawid, who's a multi-billionaire, estimated between 20, 30 plus billion dollars, says it's just a mere coincidence that Saudi Arabia is targeting not just U.S. fracking companies and fracturing companies here in the United States of America, which now the U.S. is the largest producer in the world, just miraculously since the 2008 financial collapse, but that also it's a mere coincidence that it's targeting Russia and that it's also targeting a nuclear-armed Iran. And this is also hurting Saudi Arabia. So what we have here is really an international game of chicken, a head-on collision course where, you know, looking at oil prices today, I see oil at 45 bucks a barrel, almost reaching parity at WTI, Western Texas Intermediate crude, and also Brent crude, reaching almost a parity, playing a legitimate game of chicken right now. And of course, we have this geopolitical war between the East and the West. We have the establishment of the Eurasian Union, well, Vladimir Putin in the East, and China is organizing a counterpoint to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And it's interesting how all of this is shaking out. In fact, Russia in recent days, since the ruble has collapsed, it's been cut in half. Since oil prices are collapsing, it's having to use its reserves to at least temporarily stabilize the ruble and its currency, has been going to China for loans. And China has been lending them money. Isn't it interesting that China now seems to be the kingpin of the world, and the United States is being superseded by the East? Because all of this is changing. Now, people ask, why is it a bad thing that gas prices are falling? Isn't this good for the consumer? Isn't this stimulus? Isn't this good for truckers? Isn't it good for me and my family? Yes, it is in that respect. But it is catastrophic for other countries, namely Russia, namely Venezuela, namely Iran. And, you know, if you're Iran, you're looking at your nuclear, the correct pronunciation of it, cash, a lot more attractively now with your economy suffering, with inflation taking root in your society, where Russia, for example, you're not getting the same goods into the Russian people at the grocery store. Venezuela is in the midst of riots, if not about to boil over in revolution because of these policies. So it's a gross destabilization campaign, arguably, by the West and potentially Saudi Arabia in cahoots with one another. Now, of course, Prince Alawid, or whatever his name is, he'll say that, again, this is mere coincidence, but when is the last time we actually believed a Saudi billionaire for that matter? I mean, again, he's the equivalent of Warren Buffett here in the United States. He says one thing, but what's more important to watch is what they're doing. So things that I'm looking at, for example, in oil, is until we see some stability in oil prices, and there's been virtually a collapse in recent months, I think it's a very dangerous time in the world. It's also a very dangerous time for our financial markets. I think that oil could go as low as 35 bucks a barrel. Saudis have said they're willing to withstand oil prices in the 20s if need be. And of course, this will lead to bankruptcy. This will lead to fracturing companies in the United States going out of business, people losing their jobs. People have been reaching out to me via email saying, hey, my rig was just shut down, Christopher. I just lost my job. So all of this has a profound impact on the economy. Not to mention that U.S. banks, you know, the bailout kingpins themselves, the too big to fails, these monolithic institutions that caused the collapse in 2008, have lent millions, billions, who knows, maybe trillions if you measure it in derivatives. In the multi-quadrillion derivative markets, have lent all this money to the fracturing companies, to these rigs, to this new technology, which is now going defunct, which is now going bankrupt, and it'll affect bank earnings. Of course, all of this will affect earnings for U.S. companies here in the United States. And it's why you're seeing people like pundits like Jim Cramer now having to succumb to the fact that, yeah, this might be a short-term benefit for the consumer, which makes up 2/3 of GDP here in the United States in this super leveraged society that we live, this Kim Kardashian la-la land, but it's going to affect corporate earnings. And so we have geopolitical instability. We have this intense game of chicken. And again, I don't really think it's safe, or we're safe, so to speak, until we see some stability in oil prices. Speculators are looking, how do we profit from this? Is there a way to buy long-term or long futures contracts in the oil markets? Could that potentially be a good opportunity? Yes, but I think the risk to that is, and it could be a good opportunity, the risk is this a profound paradigm shift that we're experiencing right now? Are we transitioning from the $100 a barrel, arguably manipulated price of oil that's been kind of the game for years now to something completely different? I was listening to a Goldman Sachs analyst yesterday, and he was talking about the fact that because all of this has changed with U.S. fracturing, instead of having to make an investment in oil and waiting 3 years for it to pan out, it happens like this in a matter of months now. So there's a yo-yo effect in terms of their ability to produce oil and to produce more supply at will. And this is contrary to what the experience has been for years now. It has been the experience for decades now. And I think it's why we have this game of chicken occurring right now between Saudi Arabia, between U.S. fracturing companies, between the East, Russia, etc. That's why we have this geopolitical movement in the Ukraine. And I could argue this is a profound paradigm shift, and not just the petrodollar, but also our relationship with international financial markets and the rest of the world. We're seeing in Europe now deflation. It's no longer speculative that they are experiencing deflation. They are in a massive deflationary environment. They have zero growth. They have negative interest rates. And Angela Merkel, Queen Bee of Germany, is about to launch a new round of quantitative easing on the coattails of what we've seen here in the United States of America, monetizing the debt to fabricate and fake growth. Another angle to this is maybe Obama, maybe the U.S. president, maybe the United States is realigning itself with Saudi Arabia. Maybe we're falling out with our once allies. That's also a possibility. I found it interesting also yesterday that the president, conveniently, right before his State of the Union address, right before he's going to make this major push for new internet censorship, reinvigorate things like CISPA and SOPA, just happened to have CENTCOM hacked by ISIS, allegedly. Isn't that convenient? We also talked about the North Korean hacks, which in my personal humble opinion I think was a false flag, was orchestrated by the state, was orchestrated by our intelligence agencies to blame on North Korea, everybody's favorite target, so the president can push for this new legislation. It's a reason and justification why we need the surveillance state, why we need the police state, why the NSA should and has been committing illegal and traitorous anti-constitutional acts against the American people. And now we have this convenient hack, allegedly from ISIS, for the CENTCOM website, YouTube, and Twitter accounts. Isn't this all convenient? It makes you wonder and question, when is the suitcase bomb, God forbid, going to go off? What would happen then? What happens if a bomb, as Mikhail Gorbachev, if I'm saying his name correctly, trip over these words sometimes, is correct in the fact that there is a nuclear event as a result of U.S. sanctions in Russia, as a result of this game of chicken with oil prices and this precipitous drop in crude? What would that look like? How would that affect U.S., European, and global financial markets? How would that change the perspective of the American people? So again, gas prices at these levels, incredibly dangerous. This is a major macro shift, unlike anything we've seen since the pre-collapse of the 2008 and 2009 financial crash and crisis with Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns and the merger and very risky marriage between Merrill Lynch and bankrupt of America. Again, oil prices hitting a high of about $150 a barrel before dropping precipitously, I believe, into the mid-30s, I think was the low, somewhere in that ballpark. We're seeing the same thing happen now, but the U.S. stock market doesn't seem to be following suit yet. And again, once I think we get some stability in oil markets, once things continue to hit more of a panic mode, once we see blood on the streets and we get very severe panic, will the U.S. stock market follow suit next? Will this just be another opportunity for the Federal Reserve not to act, not to raise interest rates? Again, allow Europe to ride the coattails of a new round of quantitative easing in a European Union which is arguably breaking apart at the seams today. Not just countries like Greece with the uprising of the Syriza party and that movement, that anti-bailout movement, the potential exit, Grexit from the Eurozone, many other countries potentially to follow. You see, the New World Order is arguably trying to hold on to what it's created, but I think there's a bigger picture here. See, the bigger picture is disintegration of places like the Eurozone, is a macro shift in the oil markets, the petrodollar, etc. So the New World Order elite, so to speak, can push forward that true agenda, that agenda of unity, just like what we saw with Charlie Hebdo, you know, the agenda of unity. Yeah, you know, we have free speech in this country and abroad as long as people agree with it. Donald Sterling, for example, is a perfect example of being crucified because people didn't believe or agree with his use of his freedom of free speech. They just stole his Clippers team. So it's subjective in a lot of ways. I also noticed CNN refused to put out any images of the Prophet Muhammad on their program so that they would refuse to put the new cover of Charlie Hebdo magazine on its websites and its media platform. Again, watch oil. In my opinion, personal humble opinion, this is the greatest macro event, macro shift currently taking place. It will have profound repercussions politically, economically, geopolitically, and I believe it's leading to war. I'm Christopher Green. Get it out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting and in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.